Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to interCHANGE. Thank you so very much for joining us. Today, we'll talk about how the Milwaukee area handled the big snowstorm. Should city officials be proud and in the suburban communities, or should they be embarrassed? We'll talk about the race to replace Scott Walker as Milwaukee County Executive, which is just over a week away and not generating very much excitement at all. And we'll talk about the big game, of course. Joining us tonight, our newspaper columnist, Joel McNally. Longtime State Senate Republican aide and oftentimes a fill-in host at WISN Radio, Kevin Fischer. And Denise Callaway, the coordinator of business and community partnerships for the Milwaukee Public School System. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, first let's talk about the snowstorm. Usually I can't stand the TV weather folks hyping every single winter storm like it's Armageddon right around the corner. But this one, I think they were right on target, and because most people stayed home, didn't go to work, stayed off the roads, they let the plowing crews do what I thought was an absolutely excellent job, Kevin.
I tend to agree. And wow, the power of woman for Mother Nature to wipe the Packers off the front page completely. Amazing. Wow, it's really something. Yeah. Overall, everybody came through looking really good. Now, the weather people were saying that we were going to have conditions that were life-threatening. And they were right. Usually, I'm right with you. They overhype it, and it's never as bad as they say it's going to be. And the weather people just literally take over the airwaves. This time, it was warranted, and I think because they did adequately prepare people, that people did stay home. They stayed off the roads. They were only out if they had to be. The plows did a phenomenal job. The emergency responders, the police that rescued people in my community in Franklin, they opened up a city building and were giving out free coffee and giving people a place to stay when they couldn't get home. The only, if I want to nitpick, I would say that in hindsight, MPS probably should have opened up that next day. I think the roads were open. A lot of other school districts made the right call and did send kids back. But overall, everyone just did a tremendous job. And when you look at what's been happening since the start of the new year all across the country, where I realize they've been getting clobbered more than we have, but they've always taken days and days and days to recover. And we were back in business literally in 24 hours. I think that says a lot about everybody involved in this effort. And I've said it before that when you have an emergency like this, and this was an emergency, it brings out the best in people. People help other people who are, for no fault of their own, are not equipped to handle what hit us. People look out for their neighbors and for the elderly and the disabled. So in my book, I think the community gets if not an A minus.
And Denise, before we bash MPS, though, you have to know it's a different situation there.
You're going to wait now to do that? Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm not going to bash them at all. It's a different situation there because you have, a lot of suburban communities, they aren't taking buses. But MPS, a lot of those little kids are taking buses.
Right.
And the streets were good, but the sidewalks weren't that great.
The sidewalks were a real problem the second day. I mean, it was just a huge, huge issue. I think even if you take a look in many parts of Milwaukee now, you'll see parts of sidewalks that are not shoveled. You'll see the intersections, and I think this is a real issue. The intersections are not shoveled, so you have kids, if they're going to cross the street, now who still are having to climb pretty big snow drifts in order to be able to get over the intersection. So to be able to wait that extra day, to have more people have the opportunity to clear their sidewalks, really was something that was critically important to do. And it's still a good reminder for people to make sure that when they're around schools and they're around those really tall drifts, to look out for kids, because you got some teeny little kids trying to see beyond these drifts, and kids sometimes aren't as careful as they need to be. But I would agree with Kevin in terms of the fact that I think overall this community did a fabulous job. Really did a good job in terms of responding and people, helping their neighbors. I woke up at 6 o'clock, 6:30 on Wednesday morning to the sound of a snowblower, and there's my neighbor who's a firefighter out there snowblowing the entire block. Taking care of people's sidewalks as well as the walkways up to their homes. So, I think one of the things about this community is that when we do have something that happens that really kind of tests what people are made of, most of the time, and this certainly was an occasion, we really do rise to the occasion.
It's in our blood. We're hardy Midwesterners. But you mentioned a firefighter. I would quickly add that another nitpick, if I could, is that I have noticed a lot of fire hydrants. And I know we got a ton of snow, but people really need to get out there and shovel out those fire hydrants, because you don't want a fatality because of not clearing those fire hydrants, and the mailboxes too. I didn't get mail for a couple of days, and I thought that my mailbox was accessible, but apparently not. And then overnight, again, an angel from where, I don't know, but went and plowed in front of everybody's mailboxes, and now the mail's coming again.
And I do think it's important. I think we do have to give Milwaukee's mayor, Tom Barrett, credit. A mayor knows that you better pick up the garbage, you better get those streets plowed.
Yeah.
And he's been beat up in the past for the city not doing a good job.
Yeah.
I think this time they did an excellent job, and I'm sure part of it is the mayor saying, we've got to get this done.
It was extraordinary. I mean, because this was so much more snow in such a rapid period of time than we've seen for a long, long time. Frequently, in just recent winters, we've gotten not nearly that much snow all of a sudden, and it's still taken longer, and it's been sloppier, and it's been more difficult, to get around for days, not just 24 hours later.
Yep.
Pretty much things are cleared up. I think MPS probably made the right decision about kids, because those it wasn't drifts so much as there wasn't any place to put all this snow except up, and there are enormous piles of snow, including around most of the bus stops. It's not just fire hydrants. It's where people, and there are a whole lot of particularly people in the poor community who depend on public transportation all the time, and you really literally...
The bus stops weren't very good.
No, you have to go out in the street to even see the bus coming, and of course, but there was only one day that the buses didn't run, which was kind of amazing to me too. It is
the quick turnaround was just
it was like a one-day event, and people had advance notice, and around my neighborhood, around the university, the kids who had a day off, let me think, they were out all day long shoveling and drinking. and that seemed to be a combination that worked for them.
Drinking, I guess
that seemed to be a combination that worked for them. Everybody was in good spirits. Everybody was, looking out. You're right. It was friendly. It was fun. It was like, the old-time snow days we think of as
there was no
kids.
blizzard rage. Everybody was looking to help others, but
right. We'll see how long that lasts.
Well, and now would we be able to handle, as they have out east, one after another?
It must have just all come together in an extraordinary way for it to be over that quick. This was an enormous amount of snow,
and it happened for the most part overnight.
Yeah.
During not during a rush hour.
Right.
That helped.
My husband actually had to go to work Wednesday morning. And because we had, our neighbor who did the snow blowing and another neighbor who came and plowed out the alley for us, once he got on city streets, it wasn't that bad. He actually got to work ahead of time. So I think, the city really did a great, But the city also did a really great job of making sure the roads were clear.
All right, next topic. Milwaukee County will elect a new county executive just a week from Tuesday. The race is really a yawner, though. The only excitement, unfortunately, is the ongoing revelations about how many problems slumlord Lee Holloway has with his rental properties. Other than that, there's nothing. Nobody's talking about it at all.
Well, but let's be frank. That's the only thing that the Journal-Sentinel's been reporting. They've been reporting on the rental problems of one candidate of the 5. And they haven't covered the race. They haven't. I have attended just today. I attended the second of the public forums that the 5 candidates had. So I've seen the 2 public events, which were barely reported.
They're all in Dallas, Joel.
Pardon me?
They're all in Dallas.
But truthfully, there are some interesting things talked about. If you go to these events, you will find out. First of all, you'll find out that there's actually more to Lee Holloway than just his problem with rental properties. That he's been on the county board for a long time. He has a lot of knowledge about different problems in the county and different institutions. He's been a leader on mental health and health care and some other issues. Chris Abele, who a lot of people don't know, people of importance know, but a lot of the voters don't know yet, is really talking about consolidation of services. I think the idea of reducing the duplication between the city and the county and the state could actually lead, if we really get serious about this, lead to some discussion of metropolitan government, which I think is a great thing to talk about. A lot of people are trying to figure out what to do about the county. Well, how about, merging some of the city and county services? And we have to talk about these things. Jim Sullivan from Wauwatosa is very knowledgeable about the county issues. He's a strong candidate. There are good candidates in this race, and the Journal-Sentinel has not told us a thing about any of them.
Well, none of the local media has either.
Yeah.
TV's not reported it. Radio hasn't really reported on the race at all. In a race that is, we know, going to be a low turnout race, where quite frankly there is so much at stake for the future of Milwaukee County. I just can't understand why there really hasn't been any kind of coverage of this race at all. And it really is a shame, and it's not fair to voters who are trying to seek information, because it's not easy to find.
Because they're going to come down to a barrage of just commercials the last few days, and that's it?
No.
I don't think so.
I think only one guy's got much money to spend on even advertising.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, and he's doing it every 5 minutes.
But he has to.
Well, I think he feels he has to do it in order to make the cut. And we're talking about Chris Abele, who has, he has money coming out of every pore of his body. But it's very difficult to handicap this race.
Because you don't know who's going to vote.
There is no, well, in a primary, the real hard-nosers go out and vote. But those are people who are passionate, who do follow. They go out and vote. But it's very low voter turnout. So all these ads that Chris Abele is putting out, that we are seeing ad nauseum, most of the people that are seeing them are not going to go out and vote. So will that help him? Don't know. Jeff Stone, the only conservative in the race, I think benefits because of that fact, and because you have had a conservative in that office the last 3 times prior.
Leading up to the disaster that we had.
Well, he's got name recognition because he's a state representative
in his district.
Jim Sullivan has some name recognition because he's a state senator, but he has really not done any campaigning. Lee Holloway.
Yes,
Lee Holloway is getting slammed every time you turn around, and this isn't minor stuff.
But
so,
there could be backlash from that too.
So it's so difficult to pick out because the turnout will be so low. If I had to pick, and I have absolutely no polls, nothing to back this up, I would think Jeff Stone gets in because he's the only conservative in the race, and because conservatives are still energized from last November. And I would think Chris Abele, having said what I said, still he gets in because the message is out there. And I think Democrat primary voters in Milwaukee County view him as their best chance in the general election.
Who determines the winner, the city of Milwaukee or the suburbs?
Well, I really do think that it's going to be the suburbs. I really do.
They vote.
And they won't go for Abele. They won't go for Abele.
But here's what I think we have to kind of take a look at. I don't necessarily disagree with Kevin about Stone, but I think if you take a look at Sullivan and take a look at where his strength is, his strength really is West, Wauwatosa. Take a look at what's happening with him in terms of who's endorsing him. He's really being endorsed by those labor unions who have the ability to get people out. That's going to be the real key. In a low turnout election, they don't have to get out everybody. They need to get out a substantial number of their members. So I would not write Sullivan off at all.
I say he's a dark horse.
I think the city of Milwaukee would determine it, mainly because that is where most of the voters are, period.
And they might go for Abele.
They might go for Abele, but I don't think Abele also turns off the suburbs. He is a manager class kind of guy. He is not a strict ideologue. A co-chairman of his campaign is one of the leading Republicans in this county, in this state. I think he talks to businessmen. He deals with businessmen. He's worked on projects all over this community with businessmen. But
a lot of those businessmen don't live in Milwaukee County.
That would be part of it. And he also has this going for him. He has some of the campaign professionals who ran Tom Barrett's campaign. And, you know,
Well, that could be a minus.
no, not at all, because they turned out Milwaukee County extraordinarily well in that governor's race, and I think they have the ability to do it in this
Isn't
race.
it fair to say Abley's message, though, is cloudy? He's doing what a lot of
No,
liberals
he's not, because he's being a non-politician, and that's very
He's
that's
doing what a
very
lot of liberals
popular.
do, and he's trying to talk like he's a fiscal conservative. On the other hand, we know he's a liberal, and he says, I can manage
It's
the county.
not a liberal conservative issue.
But
It
he is a liberal.
it
I mean, that's the
manager.
worst-kept secret in this
Who's
campaign.
going to
No, it's not
manage the
worst-kept
disaster
secret.
that is Milwaukee
Well,
County?
he says, I can manage the county. What does that mean? I don't think he's been very clear and explicit in these ads that are coming out of the woodwork. We don't really know what he's like. And most people who see those ads don't know what he's like. Don't know who he is.
I kind of agree with Joel. I wonder if the underlying movement behind Abley's campaign is to create a metro form of government so that the city of Milwaukee, with all its problems, has all the suburbs to tap for cash to address the city's problems.
These are community problems, and
Well,
I think ultimately that is a solution.
If
you know,
if that's your
I
game
think that's the
plan,
game plan.
if that's your game plan, then you can kiss off Hales Corners, Franklin, Greendale, Greenfield. They're not going to vote for that kind of government.
But the issue is going to be, I think, really, because this is such a low turnout election, it's who's going to be able to mobilize
Bingo.
their voters. That's the key thing. And the problem that Chris Abley faces is, yes, he does have the folks who helped to run Barrett's campaign, but they also knew Tom Barrett. He was a known commodity. Chris Abley is not. So where you may be able to have those folks who are able to run the campaign, whether or not they can generate that kind of interest and effort and momentum to get people out to vote, that's going to be the real key.
And Jeff Stone, as I mentioned on the program previously, he's been unofficially running for this behind the scenes for the last couple of years and has had his people in place.
Scott Walker was the first Republican to be elected to that office, and there's no proof yet that Republicans can be elected to that office.
Well,
If Walker and
there is proof because he's done it several times, and I think those same Scott Walker voters are going to come out big time for Jeff Stone.
Jeff
especially if
Stone
there's-
is no Scott Walker.
If there's a commercial featuring Scott Walker saying "Vote for Jeff Stone," will that persuade people to vote for
I think
Jeff
I don't
Stone?
think they need that to persuade them.
Work
Yeah.
for either side. I
Yeah.
think the people make up their own minds about the candidate, not somebody. Tommy Thompson kept trying to get people to vote for George Bush and couldn't do it.
Well, I think it's really on the ground, grassroots, who can get their message out, and if it sinks in. I don't think the Abley message, even though we're seeing it over and over and over, is convincing enough. And really, people have to get engaged. I mean, this is really going to be coming fast. And it's important. I think I think it was you, Joel, talked about how important this is. Whoever wins this is probably going to be the county executive for the next 8 to 12 years if he wants it. So it's very, very critical. And I think people right now are not engaged. They're too busy digging out and trying to figure out what they're going to serve at their party on Sunday.
All right, let's talk about the Super Bowl for just a minute.
What a segue, huh?
Absolutely. You have to think America's pulling for the Packers this year. The Steelers quarterback comes across as such a cocky public relations coach loser. I mean, he just seems a little slimy.
I agree with you.
And I think that's just going to turn America off. Everybody knows his background, but he just
That has
doesn't want to
nothing to
address
do with
the
the game,
issue.
though. That is
It
nothing.
doesn't have anything to do with the
I
game.
know.
The truth is,
Because
the
he may
teams
be
are
slimy,
pretty.
but he's pretty good.
The teams are pretty evenly matched. But I get the feeling that destiny is definitely with the Packers, and it has been week after week, going into the postseason and through the postseason. They have to be feeling good about being where they are, and I think they're ready. I mean, I really do.
Now think about it. The 3 playoff games they won were all definitive road games. This is not a road game. For once, they get to play on a neutral field. Imagine what they might be able to pull off on Sunday because it's no longer in a hostile environment.
Will it be a nail biter?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it will be.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's going to be
they're
a
going to win by
close
10
game.
points.
You think they're going to win by 10?
really?
No.
Shill.
I think no. I mean, you have to take a look at Pittsburgh's defense. I mean, it's number 1 in the league, and I think it's going to be tough for them. I think the key is going to be getting that ground game going.
And you never know whether
I know,
where that
and that's what makes me a little nervous.
It may not show up.
But if you don't, you're in trouble.
Well,
you're in trouble if you don't.
Both
because
teams have great defenses, but I
Yeah,
just
we
feel
know.
good about it.
You're right. Roethlisberger, he's a slimy guy, but he's a good quarterback.
He's good. He's been there before.
And he's a giant.
He's won the Super Bowl. He reminds me of Roman Gabriel with the old LA Rams in the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you get your hands on him and he just flings you like a rag doll. He gets the pass off. He can stay in the pocket longer because he can handle the rush. He's won it before. I think that's the intangible. As much as we love the Packers and want them to win, this Pittsburgh team cannot be taken lightly because they have been there before. And at every position, it's so even. And I think the one that it's going to take an intangible, and that is that this Pittsburgh team, as of recent years, has far more experience than the Packers do.
Why are the odds with the Packers then?
Well, I think it's sentimental. I mean, I do. I think that somehow a lot of people in this country feel the Packers have somehow reemerged after Brett Favre. And they've got this great young quarterback who's smart and good. And, you know, it's the team that has all these injuries but still manages to find a way to play and to win.
Tiny town with the 275 owners.
But
I
too, the
think that's
Packers,
it.
you know, have been on this kind of where they have a close game, then the next game they look great. And, you know, up and down a little bit, even though always on top. And
Well, and
I feel good.
and you think about the last 3 games they played, where there was a lot of national attention because there were fewer games for people to watch. They've looked fabulous, and that's another reason I think that people have really been on the Packer bandwagon. They've looked good.
Yeah, the perception is that they are, out of the 2 teams left, they are the hottest team coming in, both offensively and defensively, and I think that's why they're a slim favorite. But this has all the earmarks of being one of the greatest Super Bowls in Super Bowl history because of how close the 2 teams are. If it's a knock 'em, sock 'em defensive struggle, I don't think they stand much of a chance. The Packers have to light it up. They have to control the ball, keep the ball away from Pittsburgh, and don't make any mistakes. You make mistakes, you lose.
And that's why the ground game is going to count.
Does this excite America as much as if it was, you know, if the Cowboys were in or New York was in?
More
it's
so.
just a great
More
matchup.
so.
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the Packers, people in smaller communities see themselves. They see their values. And I think that's the reason the Packers are so attractive to people. They really are, despite what Dallas says, they are America's team.
Rick
People,
Riley of
you know.
ESPN.com wrote this week that is, and I'm paraphrasing, that is, it is next to impossible to hate the Green Bay Packers. You have to love the Green Bay Packers because they are not LA, they are not New York, they are not Dallas. They're this little tiny town. It's not even the biggest city in Wisconsin. Here's this little town, you know, this little train that could and does.
Do you think the over and under, the total score 44, is that pretty
that's
on
about
target?
Right. That's about right.
I don't know.
Fixed
I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be
know.
a 24-21, 23-21, 24-20 kind of game. So I think the experts, there's a reason they pick these numbers. They're pretty good, and I think that 44 number is, close to being right on the money.
But, you know, the other thing I think is really going to make a difference are 2 people we haven't talked about, and those are the coaches for both teams. They, you know, we're taking a look at 2 incredibly smart coaches who aren't afraid to do something different or crazy, you know, to win the game. So I really think that that's going to be a key part of it too. The coaching is going to be huge, and of course we know the officiating is going to be fine, so there won't be any difference.
Actually, Peter Gent said that football is the only game where the coaches are the players and the players are the equipment.
Huh, that's interesting.
Well, whose wardrobe is going to malfunction? That's what I want to know.
We're waiting for Fergie.
Well, yeah. Hey.
I am? Come on.
There's no way to be sure about the outcome of a particular football game, then what about even bigger events playing out clear around the world? How about the Middle East, for instance? Rick Horowitz has been watching very modestly. Rick.
Quick show of hands, please. How many of you had Egypt on your list? No, really. How many of you, when you gazed into the future at the start of 2011, which was only a month ago, remember, how many of you had Egypt on your list of places that would matter? Or should I say, how many of us? I plead clueless, too. Which, of course, hasn't stopped any of us from spouting all sorts of confident pronouncements and stern rebukes and bold predictions, despite the fact that most of what we're spouting was crammed into our brains in the past 96 hours or so. Instant experts, sudden sages. Still, the urge to say something is almost overwhelming. I mean, how can you watch tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people pouring into the streets of Cairo, demanding something different, something better, and not want to say something, not want to muse out loud about what it all means? We don't know what it all means. Let's put that out there right at the top. We don't know what it all means. We know that Egypt is the big falafel, that whatever happens in Egypt ripples across the entire Arab world. We know that what's happening in Egypt is a revolution, however it plays out. We know, or we think we do, that the revolution extends beyond Cairo to Alexandria, to Suez, who knows where else. We know, or we think we do, that it's a revolution driven by Facebook and Twitter, unless it's not. We know, or we think we do, that the army is siding with the protesters, with the people. We'll know this until the precise moment the army opens fire, if it opens fire, at which point we'll know the exact opposite. What else? We also know, or we ought to know, that these kinds of uprisings are highly unpredictable, that the people who topple the old regime aren't always the people who wind up running the show, that our own democracy might serve as an inspiration, but it's hardly an owner's manual. So we can help, or at least we can try, and we can watch, we can cheer, we can worry, we can say all sorts of things. But first we have to admit we don't know what it all means.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Stay warm, enjoy the game, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.